So the facts aren't fully out in the public domain just yet. The charges are being contested vehemently by the Adani Group. Where does the truth lie? Because what you have is a group of FIIs based out of Mauritius who invest a disproportionately large sum of their corpus in Adani Group companies. In some instances like the Elara India Opportunities Fund, 97% of the investment is in Adani Group companies. In the case of Cresta Fund, 97.40% of the investment has been in Adani Group companies. In the case of APMS investment, 96.18%, Albula investment, 95.40%, Asia Investment Corporation, 35%, LTS investment 97.47%, Vespara Fund 98.30% of the investment in companies of the Adani Group. By itself, this isn't a crime, it's not even illegal. However, this does raise questions about why these companies, which have very limited public float, are seeing such huge investments from these FIIs and all the money from those FIIs being invested in the same set of Adani Group companies. And now the action of the NSDL, which has frozen accounts of 3 FPIs, which is again something which the Adani Group is contesting. Joining me for perspective on this broadcast, I'm joined by Jayashree Upadhyay. She's a journalist with the Morning Context, has been reporting on the story closely. We have M.K. Venu, senior journalist. Siddharth Zarabi has been a business editor. Dhirendra Kumar joins us, founder and chief executive of Value Research, which tracks the stock markets very closely. Jayashree Upadhyay, I come to you first. On the back of the story that you put out, we've now seen a statement from the Adani Group which says that A, they're claiming that the demat accounts of these FPIs haven't been frozen. Is that indeed the case? If that's the case, then there isn't a story. Then why has the Adani Group lost 55,000 crore rupees of market capital? What exactly do we know at this moment? Have these accounts been frozen by the NSDL or not? Because the very basis of the market moving in the way that it did is currently under question itself.
So, of course, Rahul, just to clarify this fact that, of course, this NSDL report of the funds being frozen was coming from the Economic Times in the morning. And that was the basis of why these funds, of the way the Adani Group company shares tanked. Now, just to clarify, most of the time when NSDL or these kind of depositories freeze these accounts, it's because there are some deficiencies in the way these funds have, maybe they have not given the proper documentation or KYC documentation. That could be one of the reasons why these funds were blocked. However, now, of course, it's emerging towards the late evening after 3:30, we got to know that Adani Group testing the fact that these funds were not frozen at all. And at least APMS, which are the funds, which was APMS Investment, one of the funds which was frozen, they have clarified that this was a technical freeze, that the funds are still free to move about. So that's the so of course, NSDL would be the best organization to clarify that for you, that whether these funds have been frozen or not. But of course, there is a suspect that whether these funds were frozen or not. However, just to clarify, just to add on to the fact that why these funds, why the group companies and the way the stocks tank, was simply because of the fact that you do not have that much of a free float. Because you do not have that much of a free float, and that is so any kind of a suspect in the way these stocks, any suspect of whether the money is kosher or not, will lead to an impact, and the stocks are more prone to manipulation. And that is one of the reasons why we saw such a huge fall in these shares. And so when we were reporting on the story, we were clear that we saw 7 of these funds, which were year-on-year investing in only Adani Group of companies since 2015. The holding has hardly changed. A slight up or down, hardly you could say that this is material, because if you see the entire run that you saw last year, where the stocks really risen from 2020 to now, you would expect that you would book some profits, or you would just want to exit somewhere, or some other big foreign investor or foreign institutional investor, big institutional domestic investor would come into these stocks, but that has hardly happened. So there is a little bit of a suspect about the way, because actually, to be honest, this is a red flag. For most of the investors would be a red flag, because why else would a domestic institutional investor, a big insurance company, do not invest in Adani companies when there's such a stupendous rise in the stock prices in the past 1 year?
Okay, so let me just take our viewers through that. Adani Gas is up about 1,080%. This is in market capitalization over the past year. Adani Transmission up about 690%. Adani Group companies in total seeing a huge run up in a lot of their stocks, which raises the question, did the markets overreact? Siddharth Zarabi, what are you making of the suggestion that NSDL has in fact barred 3 of these companies and barred their demat accounts, whereas we haven't actually heard from NSDL, but from the Adani Group we are hearing that this in fact is not true?
Rahul, thank you for having me on the show, and very clearly there are 2 or 3 very important fundamental points. The last point first, it's very clear that in a market as large as India, and especially in the last 14-15 months where we have seen our valuations go up, I would have expected that the stock depository would have come out with a clarification either ways. It's very tough to now fall in the camp whether the story was right or not, and I'm going to skip that for a moment. I believe it is incumbent on the overall market regulatory architecture to clarify such a matter, especially given that there's been such a steep erosion in the value for investors. I think that's a given regardless of whether there is a corporate war, whether it is alphabet A, B, C, D, we don't know that. Now, the broader context of why this debate is very, very significant, and you touched upon it. The last 14-15 months have been stupendous for the Adani Group, and so they have been for the overall Indian stock market. Look at the number of retail investors that have come in. Look at the number of demat accounts that are actively trading at this point. It's been a stupendous year for wealth creation. It's also been a stupendous year for wealth erosion in many stocks, and markets behave like this. As far as the Adani Group goes, 5 stocks, I like to call them the Panch Pandavas really of the Adani Enterprise. It's a power business, it's enterprises, it is gas. There is also what is called Total Gas, in fact, as far as ATG is concerned. The current valuations in many investors' minds are not directly correlated with the fundamentals of the business, and you could argue this for many companies. Before someone from the group or any other expert comes and says, hey guys, why are you singling them out? The fact is there have been equally prominent, eye-popping, surprising increases in market valuations in several stocks. But as far as the Adani Group is concerned, I think there is a larger sort of business framework. Look at their foray into the airports. They got 5 airports. The subsequent award of the another 9 odd airports is stuck. Look at their forays into food and vegetables. Look at gold. They are now very, very significant and large players in the market in multiple sectors, and that has kind of come together in a story where Adani, as far as stock market is concerned, is the most momentum stock on many days. $8 billion of market value increase in the last 12-13 months, and that is not small by even global standards. So there are questions, and there is necessity for the company, for the regulators, and all participants in the market to clarify these important questions. This is not a penny stock. This is the Adani Group, Rahul.
But MK Venu, to be fair to the Adani Group, there is nothing so far to suggest that any of this is being done at the behest of the Adanis, because if there are foreign portfolio investors who see value in Adani Group companies for whatever reason, and they decide to invest a disproportionate part of their corpus in these companies, that by itself doesn't prove any mala-fide, does it?
Well, Rahul, here, in my view, the problem here is our own stock market governance. I mean, can you imagine, Rahul, this happening, this situation obtaining in any other country, say the US or any other mature market, where a major group, corporate group, a leading corporate group, which has presence across energy, green energy, gas, infrastructure, etc., and a leading market cap company, it loses, its share value collapses by 5 to 7 or 10%. It actually was much worse than it recovered on the basis of an NSDL, a depository statement, which people have found on the website. It was reported from the website, And Rahul, after all this mayhem and after many small shareholders would have lost so much money, there is no statement either from SEBI or from NSDL or any government agency responsible institution as to whether the accounts have been frozen or not, because Adani is saying that it's not frozen, and all these action, all these mayhem has happened on the belief that these accounts are frozen. So now, where does that? I mean, how do world investors look at our overall governance? You just tell me. This actually calls for Delhi to actually send a stinker to whichever agency that requires to be sent a stinker to bloody well clarify what the hell is going on. So I'm really astonished that something like this could happen. And Rahul, and in the evening we are still speculating whether NSDL has indeed frozen some of these FII accounts or not. Now, it's a fact that these stocks have run up, whatever, 600%, some companies 1,000%, as you said, in the last 1 year. And Rahul, it's also a fact, I must remind you here, that last 2020 February, the SEBI had made a statement that it is going to monitor much more closely tax havens like Mauritius and the kind of flows that are coming from there, and the monitoring in terms of looking at the end beneficiaries of these accounts that are investing through FIIs. And Rahul, mind you, this is also within the broader framework of if you remember the G20 agreement where our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, was actually very much in the forefront of, right? So this broader framework, the broader macro picture of India being part of this greater transparency of capital flows, especially in stock markets through FIIs, and being more transparent with also trying to figure out who are the real investors behind these FIIs. All these are big questions which require an answer, Rahul. And I don't see these questions being answered at all, much less we don't even now know whether the accounts are frozen or not. I mean, this is
Virendra Kumar, what are you making of this entire report? Because I was going through the bylaws of the NSDL and evaluating the circumstances under which accounts can be frozen. So bylaw 9.3.4 says the depository shall on its own freeze the participant's account, and they've given a whole bunch of conditions. One of which is if the central or state government orders it, the SEBI orders it, or some court or tribunal orders it. And then it goes on to say on the basis of orders passed by the Disciplinary Action Committee as set out in Chapter 11 of the bylaws. And then when you look at what those bylaws are and what can the Disciplinary Action Committee do under Chapter 11, it says suspension of a participant, expulsion of a participant, declaring a security as ineligible, freezing the account of the participant, which is what is supposed to have happened in this instance. How do you think we should go about unraveling whether or not this has happened and what should happen from here?
No, one is that, we should get this is actually a failure of the market regulatory infrastructure. There should be an instant verifiability, because all these information should be, we have actually become far more transparent. If I have, ever since this thing happened, I looked at all the information that we get as part of, public disclosure of the portfolios. So, you have more than 1% holding. So some of these companies, which I read in the newspaper, that they're only investors in Adani companies, they are not. They have a bunch of other companies in which they have invested. Larger scale of investment. I was looking at, the Indian funds, their exposure to these companies. It is not much. The actively managed fund, they don't invest. They don't have sizable exposure here. But I think it's, entirely our ability to look at, because in a market, a bunch of stock which has gone up by 10 times, 8 times, 6 times in the last 1 year. Of course, the market has been going up dramatically, but this has been more than dramatic. And over and above this, such kind of stocks going up in a hurry, they are looking for an excuse to fall. And there is a general distrust in the market when you have a news which comes out, which doesn't smell good. People will run for cover if they have made good money in recent past. So good time for speculation, and I don't think there is anything unusual. Many high quality stocks, they go down on the whiff of a a rumor, or we have seen in recent past itself. But this is lack of more of a regulatory infrastructure failure.
You're right, because you can't have a situation where so much investor wealth and valuation of the Adani Group stocks gets hit without knowing whether the charge itself is to have these funds been frozen.
Yeah.
Was there wrongdoing? What was that wrongdoing? It needs to be established. It cannot be done in the manner in which it has. The jury is out at this moment. I don't want to condemn or pronounce any guilt because we don't know the facts. The least that's expected from the NSDL, the SEBI, possibly even the Finance Ministry, if the NSDL doesn't do it itself, is for a complete disclosure on what actions have been taken, why is it had been taken. That will also determine what happens in the markets tomorrow. For the time being, Siddharth Zarabi, Jayashree, MK Venu and Dhirendra, thank you very much for joining us. We will come back to you for more once we have more specific details about the story. What we saw though